We really appreciate everyone for joining us. Again, this is the Other America, where me and James came together as friends and colleagues, and we wanted to create a safe space to bring people together, activists, healers, and storytellers, for uncomfortable and honest conversations around what's happening right now. And we also are so lucky to have so many other co-creators and collaborators on this project. And James will say hi, so you can see who he is as well at a certain point.
Hi, what's going on?
Hey, and this is a very open forum. We want people to feel comfortable coming in with their thoughts and questions in the comments, and putting a little hand if you want to speak. We have Sarah, who is from Happily, who's joining us to produce this right now. And so she will be making sure that everyone is seen and heard here. Today's theme is Movements Unite, Racial and Climate Justice, in honor of World Unity Week and World Rainforest Week. And I want to give out a shout out to James, who's here, and Justin for really pushing us into this space for this week. So say hi, you guys, if you're here. I don't know if they are here, but they're coming. There's Justin and James as well. So thank you. And Justin runs something called Good Decisions Only. And you could speak to that if you want. But as we get into this, I'm going to just kind of introduce what's happening and the layout of our evening. And then we're going to have a very special opening meditation by Chief Phil Lane Jr. And so definitely look forward to that. But we have many different individuals who are leading the change in these spaces. We have Chelsea Miller here. We have Jamie Margolin. We also have someone who just recently joined us today, actually, Rene John Sandy II from Hip Hop Loves Foundation. So thanks to all our panelists, and I'm not sure if Kevin is back on, but Kevin Patel also does amazing work for One Up Action. We also have a host committee, so I'm gonna just give a shout out to our host committee: Alyson Stoner, Kelly Lovell, Freedom March New York City, Khadijat Oseni, Zero Hour, Ben Gleib, Nzinga Blake, Kindra Connect, MyIntent, Good Decisions Only, of course, Never Alone Summit, and Goddess Process, and Peace Inside Live. A platform that I created with Jordana, who might be here, who's in Thailand. That's around mindfulness, meditation, and movement. And so this is kind of a connection of all those forces, spirituality, activism, and storytelling that we've seen really make changes in our own history. So thanks everyone for joining today and being part of this. So on that note, I guess, yeah, we want to have Chief Phil Lane Jr. join us, who is here, I know.
Yes, I am.
Hi, so nice to meet you, and thank you so much for your time and your energy and being here.
Honored to be here. Honored to be here, and to open this with a little prayer, but especially remembering back, you know, this has been so long coming. I remember 1978 when I first smoked the sacred pipe from Kenya, Africa. And we made a determination that our tribes, our nations, our peoples of Africa and across the Americas would come together. And I was there in the African Union not too long ago, seeing those prayers. So I want to pray that way, but for all the human family, all the human family. Otunkashila Wakantaga, creator of the universe, most beloved one, all powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one, ever forgiving one, most beloved one, most ancient way. We call upon your holy power at this time and all our ancestors to come to join us here at this gathering, at this council, at this circle. Wakantaga, creator of the universe, we call upon all those tribes in the east from where comes the red sunrise. Across the Americas, all those tribes and nations in this world, the old worlds to come, and the other side camp to come join us here this evening. We turn to the south from where comes new life, where the springtime comes, that sun is kind of hangs in the yellowish. We call upon all those tribes and nations of Asia, the South, to come and join us here this evening, to come, to listen, hear the young voices of the seventh generation that are rising as prophesied. In Kashla Wakantaga, creator of the universe, most beloved one, we call upon all those tribes and nations of the West from where comes thunder, lightning, and rain. all those tribes and nations of Africa to come here to join us in this discussion. We call upon all those tribes and nations of the north from where comes the white snow, all those tribes and nations of Europe, and all other tribes to come together before this sacred tree of life this evening. As we look deeply, deeply into the issue of the abuse of Mother Earth, the abuse of women, and the abuse of human beings because of their skin color and anything else that people think it makes them less than any other human being. So we give thanksgiving. So we give thanksgiving to Father Sky, Mother Earth, but especially for the rising of the seventh generation. As prophesied, in very short years, they will, by numbers, be the large majority upon this Mother Earth, and it will change one way or the other, sooner than later. Oh my God, oh my God. Unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps to the light of knowledge and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Ho. Aho.
Oh, thank you so much. That was beautiful. And I also know that you have a lot to share today. You have some announcements to make, and we want to create space for you to share that with everyone and how they can get involved as we begin this discussion.
Yes. And would you like me to share that, or should I just listen for a little bit?
I mean, we could use it as a jumping off point for the conversation as well.
Perfect, perfect. Well, Mitaki Epi, you know, I really, really am thankful for what you're doing here. And when I found out about this, I immediately, when invited by Brother James, I've been doing my research, which I've been doing for about 53 years. It's very clear that what's going on here is not just limited to the United States of America. You look at the research down into Canada, and I have it all here, I won't look at it later, but it's clear. Look at Australia and just New Zealand, those 4 countries. I'm saying, you look at the rates of the people of color and the arrests, and just look at places like Arizona, New Mexico, South Dakota, North Dakota. You'll see there, it is, when you begin seeing these statistics, I'm sure you young people who have had to face this, I faced it. I've seen my daughter called a prairie inn and all these kind of things, a dirty squaw, all these things. Sick people that do this kind of stuff. Yeah, you just go ahead and you can just move through those quickly. We don't have to, in fact, we don't have to look at them. You can check them later. I think that yeah, there they are. There we go. There. So, it's so wonderful. The last 9 weeks, we've had a talking circle program to train, prepare leadership to go out and hold talking circles. We call talking circles. In that process, and before that, at the 13 grandmothers, I was invited to be with them. I met a wonderful judge from Germany who spent the last several years researching restorative justice. And it's a leading person in Germany about restorative justice. I mean, really standing up and saying, we have to change, you have to look at these statistics. You know, the more people in prison, the more violent the country. At least the less racism and this and that, the more. Anyway, so what we've done is we had 2 panels at the World Unity Week, and we had 3 panels actually she held, all in restorative justice. We talked with judges, very senior relatives who were head of the Guatemala Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Canadian Holocaust that happened with the genocide that happened in our residential schools, and other places in the world, New Zealand and so forth. And we come together and we're announcing this evening that on behalf of the Union of the Condor and Eagle, on behalf of other circles, that we have called for and established a global truth and healing commission that will digitally investigate things in this Mother Earth that the systems today will not acknowledge. because they're owned by and run by those that have the resources. This will be about going to places like Wokpala, South Dakota, where the unemployment rates compared and what the jail rates are, not just Wokpala, all through South Dakota. What's going on here? What's going on in these other nation states? And what's going on down in the heart of quote unquote the ghettos? What's really going, what's happening with our relatives? Let's hear their voices, let's get them echoed. And then the final thing is, who's going to be the jury? We want to find 400 young people, balanced between women and young men and young women, and let you listen to what's happening in the world and you decide. The judges will make sure, the highest judge will make sure that we get right down to it, but let's young people, you look at this and you see if you want this in your world in the future or not. So I'm just going to say that much and to say that, I'm so happy, especially happy that our African tribes, our African nations, I had the honor to go to and visit in Ethiopia at the African Union, and our indigenous people across the Americas that were united on this date. On this date, it'll be remembered. On June 20th at 5:44 p.m. PDT, the Union of the Condor and Eagle was reestablished, reborn, and no longer is there a prophecy about the Union of the Condor and Eagle. It is here now. And we want to unite with those relatives who wish to change this world and have justice as the core operating principle of oneness. There's only one that can happen. How we chante washte. Chukmano he meodo, chinupasapa he meo, how we chante washte.
Thank you, Chief Phil, for all your work and sharing that with all of us and educating us. And also, I want to remind everyone that I'm going to be sending a follow-up email with all the links and all the ways you can get involved after this. So just in case you're wondering and you're hearing a lot of information and want to get involved. So I do want to get into this conversation of why racial justice and climate justice are a fight that are very much intertwined, because I think a lot of, there are a lot of separations right now, and a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with James, is like, he's very much obviously focused on racial injustices and finding very clear solutions for that. And when we brought up climate change and the climate justice fight, and this weekend, some people might be confused of the connections and why it's important to have these conversations together. Does anyone want to start and jump in on this? Maybe Jamie or Chelsea? And introduce yourself also if you want to recap who you are and any other things we need to know about. Hi, Jamie. Oh, yes, yeah. Hi.
So zero preference. Hi.
Okay. Oh, there's Chelsea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. My name is Chelsea Miller. I am the co-founder of Freedom March NYC, which is a youth-led civil rights organization out in New York City fighting for policy reform, as well as leading on the front lines through nonviolent protest demonstrations and voter registration that we're doing. We're actually gearing up to launch a voter registration campaign and a fight for criminal justice reform in New York City, but we'll also be expanding throughout the US that we'll be announcing on July 4th. In commemoration, but also in recognition of 1964 Freedom Summer, when a lot of white, like progressive and allies from the North went down to the South to do a lot of voter registration work. And so we are Freedom March NYC. So in that same fashion, we're going to be paying homage to that era of what it looked like to really go back to mobilizing on the ground and bringing back a lot of the digital activism back into the community. And so more information on that to be announced, but Freedom March NYC has been doing so much work over these past few weeks. We've actually raised over $50,000 at this point to transition to youth-led civil rights organization, and have been just doing a lot around policy reform, getting cops out of classrooms, defunding the NYPD to refund education back into our communities, ending qualified immunity. So the list goes on and on, but to get into more of that, feel free to head over to freedommarchnyc.com. The reason why I am here today is to talk about the intersection of race and climate justice and what that looks like. Before Freedom March NYC, I've been in the social impact space. One of the projects I worked on a few years back was actually around food insecurity and food deserts and what that looks like in a lot of low-income Black communities throughout the US. And so for those of you who don't know what food deserts are, if you look at the demographics of the type of food resources that are in communities of color, you will see the bodega, you will see the pizza shops, you will see the McDonald's before you see the buildings that have food that are not only healthy, but also accessible, and then also affordable. I think that's really, really important. So from a climate justice lens, I think that for me, especially growing up in Brooklyn, New York, where the demographic in my particular neighborhood was skewed to being immigrants, first generation Americans, Black Americans. So you saw, right, those disparities. And I would also add that even when you think about where Flint, Michigan. I mean, like there's so many ways that these conversations intersect. I would also add that when you look at where dumps are placed throughout the city, right, in the areas in which those are, it typically is right next to Black and brown communities. And so I don't really think that you can talk about climate justice, and even on a global scale with everything going on in the world, when we're talking about resources and where resources are being taken from, natural resources, right, without investigating the history of natural minerals and like how that's played a part in really subjecting a lot of communities of color, as well as Black nation states. And so there's so much research that lives on this, but I am happy to be here to really highlight some of those ways. And I can't emphasize this enough, especially in the US. Flint, Michigan, Flint has yet to still receive clean water, right? And so these are the very, very harsh realities when we're talking about the intersection of race and climate justice. And I think that we need to start thinking about more comprehensively what these conversations look like, because oftentimes it is Black and brown communities that are left out of these spaces when we're talking about climate justice, and really need these resources and funding opportunities to combat a lot of these issues that they're experiencing firsthand.
Thank you, Chelsea, for joining. This is James. Talk about why we're not in the conversation. I think that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I think that it really comes down to a global conversation on climate justice and just sustainability. And I feel like a lot of times when Black communities experience, whether that be like racial violence or climate injustice, it's typically framed as a race issue, right? And I think that there's not a lot of resource and just amplification on the work that needs to be done in that space, like with Flint, Michigan, for example, right? Of course, the media paid attention to it, but I think that a lot of the emphasis was placed on the fact, oh, like this is a Black community that's currently experiencing this, versus thinking of it as a human crisis concern, and the fact that like this is very much so tied to climate justice. And so I think that it's the framing more so than anything, and then the resources to be able to actively have all hands on deck and being able to support this work. And I would also add that because of like so many of the different intersections of, you can't necessarily talk about climate justice, particularly in communities of color, without also investigating the history of that. When we're talking about like economically, how communities of color are disenfranchised when it comes to being able to create different infrastructures for supermarkets that are healthier, right? Like who owns those supermarkets typically, without talking about gentrification and all in the displacement in a lot of ways of communities of color in the US. And so I think that for a lot of people, it's too much of a heavy issue. And because it's so multifaceted and the reason why this is happening, a lot of people and a lot of foundations and a lot of organizations and a lot of spaces tend to not touch it, because then it opens up a can of worms. But truth be told, when we're thinking about sustainable change, I think it's important to understand the intersections of all of this so that we're able to create new systems and new ways of thinking through these issues, and making sure that we're really interrogating a lot of the why. Because again, in communities of color, I don't think it's just limited to understanding it from the climate justice lens. I also think that you need to have that deep investigation of racial issues, the history of race in America, the history of redlining, the history of the ways in which like different things have been funded in communities of color, the health system in this country. So again, it's so multifaceted, but I think that this is definitely the tip of the iceberg in a piece of the larger puzzle around Black and brown communities and climate justice.
Thank you for that. That's so great. I know Jamie was about to also get in on this conversation with what you're doing. And what you're doing is also at the intersection, a movement of youth activists fighting for a livable planet for all with This Is 0 Hour. So can you talk about that and how you're bringing it all together with what you're doing?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Jamie. I am an 18-year-old climate justice organizer with 0 Hour. And what 0 Hour does, so we're called 0 Hour because this is 0 hour to act on climate change. We have no more time to take action. And we are a movement of mostly young women from all around the world. We have many chapters all around the world and also doing work in the United States, talking about, really, Chelsea did a beautiful job covering it all, the intersectionality of climate with race and gender issues and poverty and LGBT issues, and pretty much everything, pretty much every social issue that exists right now, you can tie it into the climate crisis because the climate crisis is a result of systems of oppression that have been building up for centuries. And so when it comes to, like, you know, right now it's Pride and people are talking about LGBT rights, well, queer youth are more likely to be homeless because of homophobia, especially in families. And then if you're homeless, you are more exposed to the elements and the effects of the climate crisis, and on and on. And there's other impacts as well. So pretty much every social issue that you can think of. And this isn't people like trying to make connections where they aren't there. They are factually there. Anyone who is a part of a community that has less resources or has been systematically oppressed in some way automatically feels the worst effects of the climate crisis. This issue also intersects with women's rights, which intersects with race as well. For example, the United Nations said that roughly 80% of the people displaced by the climate crisis are women. So that is not a coincidence. That is because of economic systems and intersections of discrimination that make life more difficult for women and make it more difficult for people to have the resources. And so, like I said, I'm not going to go into it because Chelsea already laid it out perfectly, but climate justice is racial justice and racial justice is climate justice, and the same thing goes for women's rights and any other issue under the sun. And so what 0 Hour does is we're working on bringing that education to as many folks as possible. So we have a campaign called Getting to the Roots of Climate Change, where we talk about, each week we've done webinars, so each week we have a different system that we address. So, our first week was colonialism, where we talked about colonization and the climate crisis. And then our second week, and we had webinars and we educated as many folks as possible and gave them tools and presentations and things like that. And working on within the climate action community and without, to just do as much education about social issues as possible. And that's really what we've been doing, I guess, in terms of intersectionality and making sure to spread awareness about that. We've also talked about the intersectionality of ableism in the climate crisis, and the intersection between the fights for disability rights and climate change, fights against, like we just tackle pretty much every social issue or system and tie it into the climate crisis in some way. The purpose of this campaign is to make sure that people are thinking about the environment not as this silo separate from all other issues. Like, it's not like climate and then all other social issues, but rather as the climate crisis as a result of the worst effects of our economic systems and the worst effects of our social issues. So it's not like we have the climate crisis and all of our social issues. It's that the climate crisis is like the ultimate mistake that came out of all of the mistakes that our society has made. It's the result of capitalism and colonialism and racism and all of these things that are all intertwined and are one and the same at some point. And then we're also working on, I guess, more in terms of what 0 Hour is doing, on working on elections, especially down ballot, trying to get as many young people registered to vote, and then voting and endorsing and supporting different progressive candidates that people that are up and coming that people need to be supporting and working. And so that's another aspect of the work that we do. And then there's also the aspect of mobilizing and going in the streets. Obviously, we haven't been able to do too much of that lately because of the coronavirus pandemic. We were actually planning a bus tour where we were going across the nation, registering young folks to vote and talking with different communities about climate justice. But that obviously had to be postponed, but we are doing a digital version of that soon. And so, yeah, that's what the work that 0 Hour does. And we're trying to make sure that it becomes, I feel like it's gotten to a point where it's become common knowledge in society that like the climate crisis is a big deal, but it hasn't become common knowledge that about how these issues intersect. And I remember I was watching a Democratic debate, and I think it was Bernie Sanders who was talking about the economy, and one of the moderators interrupted him and said, oh no, Bernie Sanders was talking about climate change, and one of the moderators interrupted him and said, no, you were supposed to talk about the economy. And Bernie was like, that's the same thing. These things are all connected. And it wasn't clicking. And so I think there's a lot to do to make the intersectionality about these issues a common knowledge in the mainstream so that we can properly tackle the climate crisis. One last thing I'll say is I think there's a lot of work we need to do both inside our movement and without. One time I was on a panel, and there were these quite older white men who were pretty much saying, this is not an exact quote, but it's pretty much exactly what they were saying. They were saying, and I quote roughly, that the reason why we haven't solved the climate crisis yet is because, and this is what they literally said, Black people and women and gay people won't stop protesting for their rights. And if they would just shut up and focus on climate change, then we could get something done. That was their mindset. It was so overtly wrong. I didn't even know how to respond. But there are people who are just like shut up about all their, I've had folks message 0 Hour. They see our platform. They see it's about social justice and change. And they're like, you guys are distracting from the climate crisis. You need to stop talking about that. And you need to just focus on the climate crisis, or else I'm not going to support you. Why are you bringing race into this? Why are you bringing gender into this? Why are you bringing economics into this? You need to stop. You need to focus on climate. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And there's so much of that even within the climate movement, of people saying, everyone needs to shut up about everything else so we can focus on the climate crisis, which couldn't be farther from the truth. And their mindset is going to get in the way of us solving this issue. And they don't understand how all of these issues are one and the same. And so that's just an example of a lot of people are still thinking like that. And so we have to do education and remedy, because we're not going to be able to solve the climate crisis if there are still people thinking that the way to solve it is to shut up about all our issues, which again, could not be further from the truth.
Wow.
Sure,
That's inspiring, to say the least.
Sure, I know this is not in the agenda, and sorry, Sarah, if I'm screwing things up, but can we pause for Chelsea and Jamie and this incredible youth movement that's happening? I just want to reflect on these two and give them as much support as we can. They need it, and we are here for them. We are here for you guys anytime. It's not just a Sunday thing, by the way. We're really here for you, and just keep doing amazing work. I'm so inspired by what you guys had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, because what were we doing at 18 or even college? I mean, it was different. It was, I know.
0 Hour here.
And I also want to bring in Rene John Sandy, the second. How do I pronounce your first? Is it Rene John or Rene?
My first name is Rene, and my last name is John Sandy.
Okay, perfect. So, and thank you for joining us the last minute. I know you jumped on last minute today, so thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thanks for inviting me here.
And you run the Hip Hop Loves Foundation, among many other things. You've been an exec, life coach, nonprofit activist, and you're bringing experience in talent management and marketing to these spaces as well. But why was this an important conversation for you to be part of when you heard about it?
Well, I got invited about it, and I think it was talking about just different tiers of what's going on in our world. And I mean, I'll give a little background just first, what the main things I'm working on right now, and can kind of delve into that. My organization, its mission is to educate and empower youth globally. We created workshops based off the pillars of hip hop, sports, and arts, and we use technology as a platform to connect youth globally. I'm from New York City. My roots are from New York and Trinidad and Tobago. I'm currently in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil now. I've been here for about 1 year and 4 months, organizing workshops and developing partnerships here, just to empower a lot of youth. And if people are familiar with what's going on in Rio, like in Brazil, they have areas called favelas, which you're seeing a lot of stuff that goes on, like that's just very similar to what's happening in the United States, but like even times 10. And, you know, like there is a quote unquote, I guess you say, people getting together for racial injustice, but like I would say the difference even from Brazil to America, like there's no white people on the front line here. Like there's no one supporting that here. And the cops work run very differently. Like you got kids around here with AK-47, ASR-10s, grenades and all that, where you don't have the same type of thing happening, like say in New York, you know, or in America. But I mean, it was important for me. I mean, I'm listening to what everyone says, and I just want to say, like, you know, it's really kudos to everyone that the work that you're doing. And yeah, all this stuff is layered. And I think one of the things, there are a lot of layers to everything that's happening in this world. I feel one thing that's very important that people have to realize, and I think is everyone has to kind of point within themselves and look at like, what can you do to be better? What can you do to change the community and be better? Because everyone likes to point fingers at everybody else, and you have to look at like what is it that you're doing? And even with certain things like I've listened to and see experience like people talking about, okay, climate change, like climate injustice, racial injustice, like, and at times there are these debates amongst both these things, like which one's more important, which one's better, and people are going back, like they're all important. And I think these are like, for like a conversation like this is good because people can listen and understand why people feel compassionate or, you know, or even passionate about what they're pursuing. And I think that's like more of the conversations that we need to have as, you know, a unit in regards to these things so people can understand more about this. You know, like when I just listened to what the young lady just said about, you know, what people are saying about like, well, what about the, you know, if everyone else is shut up and basically we could, you know, be done with the, you know, fix the climate change. Like, no, that's not the solution. Like, you got to listen to what everyone else is saying to get to the solution, you know, to get these solutions and really not hear, listen, like register what people are saying. And it's something that is not going to be resolved in a month or in a year. You know, like when you look at racial injustice, I mean, the reality is in American history, like Mississippi just ratified the 13th Amendment in 2015. So technically, you can still have slaves in Mississippi up until 2015. So you can't expect, you know, this all being a harmonious, you know, we are one situation in America in 5 years when you're seeing all the stuff that's been going on for over 400 years, but then one state didn't even agree to this until 5 years ago. So, you know, we have a lot of things, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of just conversations that are going to have to be uncomfortable. There's a lot of listening that needs to happen. And there's also action and people working together. Because the problem when you look at these things, we've been so segregated amongst these items, and that's been what's caused a lot of the problems. And people have been in their own bubbles. So, you know, I can kind of understand why people don't get it, because if you're in this bubble for all these years in your life, and now you're kind of getting out of this bubble, and then people are saying things to you, it's kind of hard for someone to get something like that, you know? And I think what someone said too, it's not even like when you're looking at all these issues, there's issues inside the issues. So there's issues inside the communities that also have to get resolved within, you know, the people who are being oppressed, to also being able to build it and make this a place. So I think, you know, there's, again, like there's a lot of layers with this. And for us, I'm passionate about it. And I feel like when I'm listening to, you know, younger generation and what they're doing, I think more and more they get it. And, you know, and that's why it's important for like our work, the work that we do is with youth, you know, for there's youth empowerment, like teaching kids how, you know, about equality, teaching kids about all these different topics to understand that, and also teaching kids how to be socially, economically, environmentally responsible. So they can pass that on. And sometimes the youth can teach the older generations these things. Like they can go back, you know, we've had situations where young kids have taught their parents something, and our parents are coming to us like, thank you for, you know, doing this, you know, these workshops we do on our kids, because I've actually learning a lot. You know, I'm not even in the class, you know, and so, and that's where I think we have to look at this as like an exchange, and, you know, on cultural exchange, on a whole global exchange, and really getting together, because what people are seeing, like, right, what's happening right now, like, okay, with George Floyd, that kind of, I guess you want to say, cracked the bubble open as far as like, okay, we need to do something about this right now. The thing is, this is happening all over the world. It's not just about even Black, it's about just people being oppressed in our world, like all different cultures, different ethnicities, different people of sexual orientations, all of it, you know, and that's what people can really identify to this, you know. So, you know, again, that's why I, you know, was a part of this, because I wanted to, you know, I like to listen and hear what people have to say, what people are addressing, what people are working on as far as like what's important to them. And even it's a learning process that everyone has to learn. Like, no one knows everything. And like, people sit around sometimes thinking that, oh, you went to college or you went to this type of schooling, like you're better than people. No, that's not it. Like, you know, you got a lot of people who have a lot of degrees, and just quite frankly, you got a lot of people who have a lot of degrees right now that aren't putting any action into stuff like this, you know, and into creating a change in our world. And that's what we need to, as people, not only hold ourselves accountable and hold other people accountable, you know, we got to be working together. And that's what's very important to me.
Thank you so much for joining in on this conversation. We appreciate it. And I know Justin, Markell, Rene just wanted to, James, Rene needs to actually jump off from the, okay.
Yeah, you have to run.
Kelly Lovell, no, from the Youth UN General Assembly, wanted to just say something before she has to jump.
Okay.
Yeah, I can intro Kelly really quick too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey everyone.
I mean, really respect the work you're doing. I mean, one thing I can share about Kelly is I know that she's been building communities of youth to support social impact in over 50 countries globally. She's had a book come out. She also is behind Bridging the Gap Ventures and has partnered with the UN to do the first UN-specific, youth-specific General Assembly during UN Week. And I know that she is interested in getting all of us behind those efforts and finding ways to collaborate. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for allowing me to join today. Just continue to be inspired by all the previous speakers, and very excited to connect with you and see how I can serve your missions through some of my work. My focus is bridging the opportunity gaps for young people to create a better world. I'm very passionate about multi-generational and multi-sector solutions. So really understanding change doesn't happen in isolation, and we need everyone at the table. In particular, what would be of relevance to this conversation in the immediate kind of current scenarios happening in the world is I work with the United Nations Secretary General's office, and I founded the Nzinga Forum. In the UN General Assembly, UNGA, is the world's largest town hall of today's leaders who make decisions about our future, yet oftentimes all the generations and people who will experience the consequences and or outcomes of those decisions are not at the table. And so what Nzinga looks to do is host a first of its kind global youth takeover of the United Nations, making sure that leaders of tomorrow and today are co-creating solutions together across the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, of which everything from reducing inequalities, climate action, peace, social justice, all of these are key themes and pillars. And so really it's built on inclusion and participation. We're using VR and mixed reality technologies to make this truly accessible to young people globally, regardless of their location. So they can literally be in the room with the Secretary General and shake their hands, whether they're tuning in from Ghana or Singapore or India or Canada, and be in that room with peers. VR is a fantastic way to build a lot of these things we were just talking about, building a ground for compassion, for collaboration, empathy through 360 simulations. We can take you to the Arctic and show you the effects of climate change before you come up and discuss solutions. We can bring you on the ground to experience what it's like to be a person experience homelessness, so you have that lived experience as you're discussing solutions. So this event and this initiative is all about breaking down boundaries, creating access, and empowering youth who I truly believe are not just leaders of tomorrow. As we've seen from some of my fellow young women on this call, young people are truly leaders of today. And it really is about connecting them with decision makers who have the power to enact their ideas and break down the barriers that they're facing. So really, I just encourage you, if there's any way that I can be of service to you with this platform, we can do an immersive session that you can facilitate, involving speakers, voicing and incorporating your missions into our program, and connecting you with young change makers in 243 countries. We're 2 away from everyone in the world.
Wow.
We have all, so this is kind of my forte, connecting you with emerging change makers around the world. So please consider me as an aid to you, and however I can help, I'd be pleased to do so.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today to share that. That's a lot of good stuff that you're working on. And once again, we'll include it in the recap email of this event after the fact, so people can easily click through and get in touch.
Thank you.
So we appreciate it. Thank you. And you look amazing. You have the perfect light. I'm just like coming from Venice, just like wearing my Sunday's best here. So thank you. And I know James had a question also, and I want to remind everyone, we do have a WhatsApp. So like, we encourage everyone to go to our WhatsApp. We'll include a link in the chat where we continue this conversation in between these virtual town halls, which we've decided we're going to do twice a month right now. So we'll do the next one probably after July 4th, etc. So we'll be, in there to share links and continue the conversation in between these virtual town halls. James.
I have a question. Wow, like what did we do this week? This is great. We have so many inspirational people. I really thought that the young folks, are doing some incredible, I want to make sure that we're a resource for you guys, seriously. But moving over to Rene, to the bang. Appreciate you, appreciate the work you're doing, man. I know Brazil a little bit, have a little crew there, but most importantly, I came from hip hop. So I really understand the idea of the framework of what you're doing. I was a part of the early business, building the railroad tracks that are now hip hop. So thank you for the work you're doing. Again, would love to support you. What's really interesting is I think, when I look at hip hop and where it is now, it's really an inclusive community. It's like this. It's sort of the spirit behind why Shira and I are doing this, right? It's a community that welcomes all. It's the only inclusive versus exclusive genre of music. And it has these railroad tracks that run from Brooklyn to Brazil, Brazil to Brixton, Brixton to Nigeria, Nigeria to Minnesota, to Oakland to LA. So in the work that you're doing, I feel like, when you look at hip hop, it's not just the music and the dance, it's actually the way we do marketing, the way we actually go to the streets. And I think that the work that you're doing to train activists is after my heart, and using something that's been so dear to me and it's been a part of my culture. To be able to use that as a canvas and a business framework by which we launch activists. Because I always think of launching things like an artist, right? I spent a lot of years doing that. So every campaign, every startup I work with feels like a hip hop record with a white label and a mixtape, and all the things that I did in hip hop. I use the same framework to launch things today. So I would love to support you, and I have a lot of people to connect you with that move between New York, Brazil, other places, and it's our Wakanda, right? It's this ecosystem that runs underneath, and so whatever.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, man. I just want to also share that with that, hip hop is basically, when you get down to the roots of it and the culture of it, it's colorblind. Like it doesn't matter where you're from, what you are, your background. Is like, if you're about the culture, you're about the culture. Like for example, we're just finishing up a compilation now with artists from 40 different countries. That's going to be for an initiative for Haiti, to be doing workshops in Haiti in 2021. And we also have another project called Stop Shooting, where we have some of the students that we've done workshops with, and artists from 20 different countries working on a whole project of the songs about anti-gun violence and even creating solutions around that. And we have a Global Empowerment and Cultural Summit that we'll be doing a virtual one this year in November, but we're gonna actually have an in-person one next November from November 18th to November 29th of 2021. That will be in Rio. So it's gonna be bringing everybody together, like from artists, activists, community leaders, and all that, to sit down and talk about like all of these type of issues, and being able to have action solutions and action items moving out of that. So, you know, I definitely will share more as, you know, things, you know, progress.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And I know we actually have James is also putting in a lot here in the chat, and then I want to go to Clivia von Dewitz, and if anyone has any other questions or anything they want to share, please let me know. James or Clivia, or yeah, we'll go to Clivia. Is it Clivia?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for setting up this call. Thank you, Phil, for letting me know. I am a German youth court judge, and this is the first panel where I see social justice, race, and climate justice combined, which is so important. I want to add one thought. I always felt that it's our task to actually help people turn their lives around, that they can serve in making this world a better place. And I'm so inspired what I've just heard from you guys. Yes, the young people are the leaders. In any ways I can support you, I'm here. And it's so important that we recognize that we are all made of the same material. We are all equal. We have the same desires. We are running away from the same negative emotions. And it starts with us. And exactly what you said, Rene, we need to exchange ideas. We need to look at where we are. And I just want to share, I was sitting on a panel with Carlos Williams on Friday, and he spent a lot of time in jail through his teenage years, through his adult life. And he said, but I never saw race. I always had a best white friend, and I had a best friend who was Latino. And even though I was in touch with a lot of law enforcement and the justice system, I was never subject to racism. And I realized it starts with us if we don't see racism. So I just want to encourage all of us, and I know it's very important to go to the streets and to raise our voice everywhere, everyone of all colors, but also to change it inside. My mother used to say, you cannot change the world, but if you can change where you are, if you can bring peace to the world where you are, you can make a change. And if everybody does it, the world changes. So thank you for letting me talk. And thank you, Phil, for being so compassionate about our project, this Global Healing and Truth Commission. Thank you.
You. And I want to also be honest, like I think that that when you say like we're all, you know, it's not about race, I think we don't want to be colorblind in these conversations also, and we want to acknowledge that, you know, that that we are talking about the Black community, and then there's also POC and all that. And I think by acknowledging that, you're also then really looking at the problem. But I do get the overall picture of bringing everyone together. I just want to, that was something that I've talked about with friends of mine in the Black community. So I think it's important to mention that, like, well, but I know your intentions behind when you say that. Does that make sense, James?
Yeah, thank you for stepping in on that. That was a little bit problematic for me. But
that's why I want to be honest, because like I do want, this is a place to have honest conversations, and the only way to bring people together for change is to, but like, I love your share, Clivia, and it's not about shaming or trying to embarrass people. It's about saying, like, when you bring something up, like, we get to talk about it, and if you feel things from it, James. But I just wanted to mention that. So
yeah, no, that's the intention of why we started this 4 Sundays. It's been 4 Sundays. Wow, 4 Sundays ago we started this. To really have real conversation and to talk about things and unpack it and create a safe space, so that, you know, I know the first or second week is that when I outlawed the use of the word allies and moved us to comrades. you know, things like that. Like language is important. We don't use allies. We use comrades. Allies is weak, and we're looking.
And that's what we learn from each other. Yeah.
So that was week 1 for some of you who are new to the train, new to the Sunday night train. And week 2, week 3, week 4, and we hope to grow in every show. And it's really about growing. So thank you for just appreciating the space and allowing us to kind of clarify language and clarify intentions.
And I'm very sorry, English is not my native language. And can you please, I think, what was the point that you kind of wanted to jump in?
It could be, yeah, it could be language. It also could be that, but just so we're clear, it's like, we acknowledge our race. I'm a Black man, you know, I'm very much, it's not something that I'm looking to just be in one unified. I'm Black, and I was raised as a Black man. And so for me, it's really important for you to see me. A guy actually texted me this morning. He said, he went to high school with me, and he said, you know, I grew up and I never even really knew like designations until I got to college. And he was my friend in high school. He's like, my mom raised me right. And I was like, well, that's cool, but like my mom raised me to be Black, you know. My mom raised me to be a Black man, and it's really, really important. And my mom is white, by the way, too. So I have a white mom who actually raised me to be a Black man. You know, I think that's important to make those distinctions when you're coming up in this world. And I think that my mom, you know, identified me and said, you are a Black boy in this country. I think those things are really important.
If I can just share one thing, which is responding to that, I think that the issue really is that, like, as long as racism is a powerful force in our society, when you say something like race doesn't matter, it can be very triggering. When you say, oh, we're all white, we shouldn't see race, but that everybody sees it and it affects people, and racism is a powerful force. And so what you said comes across as like denying its existence. And so that's really, I think, what the issue is like, it's there and we need to address it and confront it. You know, I like to say right now that the Civil War is still happening. Mississippi is still flying a Confederate flag. Donald Trump is our last white supremacist president, hopefully. And, you know, racism birthed our nation, and it's something that we need to confront and fight against. And so denial is very, while it sounds beautiful, it's problematic in the current state that we're in.
And I'm really sorry. I didn't want to be misunderstood. And I just explained to my white friends how important it is to today say Black Lives Matter, because I see this imbalance and it's important. I get that. And thank you for being so honest and just telling me directly, hey, there was something that I was triggered by, that I will never do this mistake again. So I really didn't want to, that's really, and Carlos I was referring to as African-American. I just loved how he was sharing his experiences. So I'm really, really sorry. And please, this is not what I was
No, don't. Clivia, yeah, we hear you. Oh, Renee, if you want to say
We actually
something.
created this space, Clivia, for that. So we actually love it. Like if I don't do that, if I don't have the conversation with you, then what are we doing? Like we all have things to do on Sunday, right? So let's have a real conversation. There's no harm. We actually create the space to do whatever. It's all good, no harm.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on that. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think it was great that this got pointed out. But you know, these are these conversations, and this is these places where people can speak and be vulnerable, and where people are not taking offense. Like, hey, let me just explain to you, like, what you say. Like, I know when we've done workshops in a workshop in Tulane Reservation in Seattle, outside of Seattle, and you know, they explained to me. Okay, let me explain to you, like natives were like, let me explain to you how you address what you say, what's not offensive, what's offensive, what's not offensive, how you go about certain things when you're gonna go in this community. And I learned a lot from that, because I could have went in there, I probably would have went in there and said something that was offensive, and they may have not taken it. Maybe someone would have taken it offensive, maybe someone would have just like this, like, hey, it was a trigger, and I know you come in here meaning well, but let me explain to you, you know, how it is in our community. So that's what the important part is. Instead of us fighting one another, like, hey, you just understand, and everyone's listening. That's the important part, the listening.
So important. Thank you, Renee, for adding to that. I know, James, and we have some people in the comments that I definitely want to go to. James, you'd mentioned something earlier that you wanted to highlight. James Hanusa.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being a part of it. And I guess I really was hoping, and I felt this calling for a larger coming together of movements. And we'd seen some intersectionality with Pride and Black Lives Matter in the past on this program. And I've been working, Justin and I have been working with Artists for Amazonia this last week, and it was also Unity Week, which many folks were involved with here and globally. So, wanted to get the timing right, because as people were on the streets and as things were going down, hardcore with Black Lives Matter, that obviously was not the time to explore these intersectionality conversations. And I'm not sure now is either. I think this is probably an edge conversation, but eventually, I think we're more powerful together. And I think there's historic ties between, for example, indigenous communities and Black communities. You see that in the Bay Area, for example, the Black Panthers and the American Indian movement. And I didn't find out until doing my homework that the American Indian movement came about because of police brutality in Minneapolis in the late 60s. So those our history and the current situation is there. And I really want to see, when the timing's right and the strategy for the movements makes sense, how we come together in a larger, more powerful movement, or movements moving in the same direction. It's not like we all have to join each other. But I think if we all kind of have a North Star and are moving together, that we can create a larger, more powerful movement. So I just want to leave it open as a kind of a prompt if we get to it or not in our next half hour. But this is a great cross-section of movements, I think, that is gathered here tonight.
And yeah, Chief Phil actually raised his hand as well, who wanted to jump in.
Yes, I want to just share that I see really two issues that are just together: racism and sexism. The sexism dimension comes in climate change, in that the way we treat Mother Earth is no different than the way we treat women. You have 50% of the world's population, or a little bit more, oppressed, literally. Oppressed. It's just like racism, no different. And then you have that attitude, which, I have to say that my generation, particularly some relatives I know, my males my age, have this idea somehow that women are just, whatever. They're not a man, so to speak. So how they treat women is exactly how they treat Mother Earth. No different. Exactly. And the racism side of the deal is the same thing. It comes out of the same lack of understanding of oneness. And I'm going to say the challenge I see of racism and sexism and adultism and ageism, and we can go on and on, they're unconscious many times. Unconscious. You could say it, they're just unconscious. So this kind of dialogue, they say with love and compassion, the clash of different opinions ignites the fire of truth. And I'm really thankful that the seventh generation is not stepping back from having a little fire in the center of this circle, because it's going to take that fire to get down to this situation that we're facing. I think the other thing, the last thing I want to share is this. I have to say this. There really is an unconscious superiority or conscious self-absorption, and I can say this having grown up in the United States, by people living in the United States. They do not understand and feel, they think the whole world is in the United States. And in order to step out of this hole we're in, we've got to step out and see truly the whole Mother Earth and understand Mother Earth without dealing and addressing all these issues. It's like we just like sure you felt, we might have signed peace treaties. We never, ever surrendered, never, ever. And I tell you, that will never surrender. And that's the thing we have. Each of us has each of us is a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting, and each of us unique. And that's why I think a lot of this has to get down to what I call spiritual reconciliation and cultural reconciliation. That's the dynamic. Because if I was born, we know this, in Kenya, Africa, in a village in Kenya, Africa, I would speak Lesotho, Lesotho is in South Africa, but I would speak the language, I would act, and I've seen it. So the fact is that we've got to get down to the business here. What is really the issues between us? You know, and I'd say, again, sexism, until we wake up that the eagle of humanity has two wings, one is male and one is female, there will never be peace on this earth, nor will it be the end of climate change until we face that, as well as the racism that's completely constricting this. And that means we have to get into the streams of wealth and poverty. And where did all that resource go? They ripped out of Africa. They ripped out of the Americas. It's sitting right in the royal families and right in the Vatican and right in those places. So what do we do about that? The papal bulls that completely allowed slavery in Africa and every place. These are some big issues that the young people I know are going to address. So that's my little point of view here. And to say thank you. I'm with you. Thank you for listening, old man. Go on and on.
Young at heart. And Chelsea, actually speaking of which, Chelsea Miller, I know has to leave, but I wanted to give her the space to say some final words.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that. So listening to what everyone is saying, I think that we are definitely headed in the right direction, right? And I say that because I know that conversation is only one aspect, but strategy is also so important. And so I want to share with the community some of the work that Freedom March NYC is getting geared up to do over these next few weeks. So we know that Juneteenth was last week, and we came out into New York and really amplified the importance of freedom and the fact that we aren't free, right? And nothing can, within this moment, can undo over 400 years of the history of this country without strategically thinking about what next steps look like. I will also say that it is my responsibility to share the fact that we aren't done. We aren't done on the front lines, and we are nowhere near the work that needs to be done and the policy change that needs to be made. So I know that we've been seeing in recent days and weeks, right, not even just in New York City, but across the country, around different chokeholds being banned. But truth be told, chokeholds have been banned in police districts throughout the country, and they're still used anyways. So the issue isn't around chokeholds, it's around accountability, and it's around making sure that when chokeholds are used, who is going to make sure that police officers are held accountable? Who's going to make sure that the system that is paid for by tax dollars is beholden back into communities and into citizens, right? And who's going to make sure that this doesn't happen again, where America is faced with addressing two pandemics at once, which is, of course, COVID-19, but also racism, which has been killing us a lot longer. So with that being said, again, Freedom March NYC is gearing up to transition into a youth-led civil rights organization. And so on July 4th, we'll be making the announcement of Freedom Summer, where we'll actually be traveling to the swing states throughout the entire country, providing voter registration mobilization, because we know that voter suppression is going to be a huge issue leading up to the elections. It's also going to be an opportunity for us to continue to push forth policy change on the grassroots level going up. And so we're super excited to be hitting over a dozen states throughout the summer leading up to the elections. We'll be having a press campaign to announce it and things of that sort. But if anyone is interested in getting involved in what that mass mobilization will look like, there's also the March on Washington that's going to be happening in August, where Freedom March will be training youth organizers throughout the US to be able to mobilize for the March on Washington with our policy demands around really systemic change and not these Band-Aid policies that have been created to address very surgical issues. And so it's really important for us to continue to apply the pressure to make sure that the media doesn't take hold of the narrative and we control the narrative. And the narrative is the fact that the time is now for a widespread approach to how we go about addressing criminal justice reform, and recognizing that, again, it's tied to so many other forms of oppression, which we've spoken about on this call. So super excited to be a part of this community and do the work and all of that. And so if anyone's interested in talking offline about this and how you can get involved in what's happening on the front lines, then definitely reach out to me. I'm accessible, and we're always looking for resources, funding, things of that sort to continue to support the work.
So
amazing. Wow.
The marathon, not a race.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, this is amazing. And I'm also going to include all the links in the follow-up email as well. And anything we can do to support in between at any point, we're there.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your hard work. This is so great. Wow. I'm like, no, I'm not worthy. It's like, that's the moment as you go, like, continue what you're doing. I'm like, holy mother. No, it's really beautiful to see. And it's like, it even, I think, charges up the adults, you know. I think it really forces us to take accountability and responsibility when you see so many young people and you're like, what are we doing? Right. Like day to day even. So thank you.
Yeah,
one right here.
James?
I also have to go, so I'd love to leave a final thought before
Yes.
I have to log off right now. But thank you, Chelsea, for the work that you do. Or did she? Okay. No.
Yeah. Hey, Jamie.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for this conversation. I just want to say, if you'd like to connect with the work that Zero Hour does, you can go to thisiszerohour.org. We are working on our Vote for Our Future campaign, mobilizing similar to what Chelsea at her movement is doing. We're also going to be mobilizing around voting and getting young people out to vote and continuing to make climate justice a pressing issue in the mainstream and making sure that people are paying attention to it. So to learn more about that, you can go to our website, thisiszerohour.org. I also wanted to mention real quick that I have a book that recently came out called Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It, which is a guide to being a young organizer for any cause, and interviews 19 young organizers from many different causes, including Black Lives Matter, LGBT rights, and a bunch of other social issues and justice issues. And it's pretty much just a guide for anyone who wants to start getting involved but doesn't know how. And it's out now everywhere. So I will leave the link in the chat, but I'll also tell you guys, you can go to www.youthtopowerbook.com. So it's youthtopowerbook.com to learn more about the book. And if you guys want to get it and help spread the word, that would be really amazing. Put a lot of love into this book for a long time. So I just wanted to mention that.
I have a couple questions. First of all, no posters there, Jamie.
Yeah.
I have a couple of those.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I got someone just gave me a bunch of them and I just put them up.
So
really cool.
Listen, do you do workshops for brands? Because I think there's probably some other partners we may have that may want to have you speak, or do you do those kinds of things?
I'm very weary in terms of corporate sponsorships, but you can loop me in terms of who it is. Cause I don't have I'm open to a possibility, but I'm just very cautious whenever it comes to companies. But just definitely loop me in, and then I'll see if Zero Hour or someone else, or maybe the opportunity would work for me. So I'll leave my email in the chat, and I'll also leave the book website in the chat as well. I do have to go, but I will leave my email. It's jamie@thisiszerohour.org.
And we're gonna buy 10 books, okay?
Oh my God,
we will support.
Thank you. And I'll leave the website, youthtopowerbook.com. Tell a friend. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys hosting this conversation, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their Sunday. Thank you for your contributions.
Yeah, thank you for being here and for your time. Wow. So many amazing things happening on the ground, and I think it's important for us all to connect cross generations, cross cultures, cross countries even. I know there's some people in Canada here. Everyone's trying to just come together for the right thing. Thank you, Jamie. I know Heidi had something to say. Heidi, if you want to turn on your audio.
Yes. First of all, I thank you so very much for this intersectional and informative and most important discussion. I think that this is so important to look at all of the different elements and connect the dots together. And I thank you for helping to do this. And I thank both Phil Lane Jr. and Clivia von Dewitz for the work that they're doing. Thank you for Brother Phil for letting us know about this. And I don't know if everybody has seen the links and the things that I have put into the chat, but the question that I have has to do with if so many of the environmental injustices that are happening in our planet are happening because of the actions of corporations that aren't people. How can we have such truth and reconciliation acts with those corporations? Would it be with the people that are on the boards, or the board of directors, the president, the leadership of those organizations or corporations? I'm thinking like the BP Deepwater Horizon oil volcano. It was a man-made thing, not a spill. And it was dereliction of duty to that caused that disaster. And if you think of the Formosa, the chemical plants that are causing the cancer and the death along the Cancer Rally in Louisiana, they're responsible for the COVID-19 rates, death rates that are higher in that region. So how do you grapple with those kinds of things? And also, how do we make sure that the rights of nature are honored, so that these by not just the governments but the people that are working in the world, but by these corporations, so that and how do we put laws into place that will protect those? Or how can we put enough pressure on this so that this stuff doesn't happen again? Am I making sense? Do you have any clarifying questions for me?
Yeah.
In order to answer this?
Yeah. Was that question directed at?
I think it's just directed at anyone here who wants to join in and answer.
Yeah, basically. And also, if Phil and Clivia have any thoughts on this too, I would appreciate them chiming in as well if they have any thoughts.
I'll chime in if no one else has anything to say. Shira, I hate an empty mic.
Listen. I just want to listen. I'm listening. That's all. You go ahead, take her, James.
Okay. No, I lean in on these conversations because I don't know everything. So this is one that I am, definitely. I don't understand one part of it. The other part I do understand is the corporate pressure, because I work in that world. And I've been working in that world for a long time. And the last 10 days have put me in a position where I'm spending a lot of time with C-suites talking about equity. And I will say that it's really important that we recognize that, consumers have power. And there is some power in what we choose to buy as consumers, and I know in the conversation about racial equity, it's been about even more so than even what how it's like, who are the decision makers and how do we get our voices inside in positions, and or how are they making statements and not backing that up with some sort of measurement system. So like if you were going to launch an ad and you were Nike, you would measure against the shoes you sold. You would measure against the $40 million you spent in advertising. So what happens is the corporations have to look at these through the same way they look at other KPI and other measurable goals. And that's what we're doing, the pressure that me and my community are putting on corporations is not just say Black Lives Matters, but like, how do you measure that? How does that change the vendors you're hiring? Who buys the cups from the Lakers? So I think in the same way, just, again, not knowing, I'm intersectional, but I'm also fighting another fight on Monday through Friday. I know what has worked and what has been important is to look at this as systemic. And I think that's the work that we're trying to do, is to make sure we don't just make this a commitment in May that no one hears about in 2021. And so you keep pressure on the commitments that are made by corporations, and you let the consumers know where the brand is on that. So I think there's another step in this sort of, for instance, in the Black Lives Matter, is about making sure someone's keeping them accountable. So that's helpful. That's been a strategy.
And you could speak on also Facebook, and I know Mark wanted to talk, but how, a lot of corporations are taking their ads out of Facebook and they're boycotting. And I think it shows when those big corporations come together, and how, Mark Zuckerberg lost $7 billion in a day, or just in a few days of this happening.
He's gonna have a horrible week. He's gonna have a horrible week on Monday. It's gonna be terrible for him tomorrow.
So I think that when pressure is created, I think it's from consumers, but it's also from the people spending the money. And consumers are a large part of that, but there's also intertwined in all these other corporate, companies that are also aligned. And so it's important to know that. And yeah, it is boards, it is the execs, but ultimately, like, you have to hit them where it hurts, right?
Yeah, if you play in the ivory tower, you're never going to win. So that's just a bunch of dudes who are playing golf with each other, right? And cutting deals. Like, you got to punch them in their right, punch them where it hurts and make them hurt, and then get people on the inside to be, people who can from the inside create voice, and then hold them accountable to the inside voices. I mean, I've worked inside a bunch of corporations, so I know how the game is played. And I think the same thing for this conversation about climate. It's, really hold them.
Mark, you had something, I wasn't sure. I kind of like referenced what you said, but.
I'm just apologize for the hair. I still haven't got my haircut. What's happening with Starbucks is a very good example of consumerism, pressure, and them seeing that they have not only shareholders to respond to, but clients. And it's a combination, and the clients are also shareholders. So what they did with Facebook and what many corporations are doing by making large donations during the COVID and a wide variety is they're starting to respond. And it's again, just like voting, it's being a constant, I use the phrase persistent and consistent message. It's not just coming out and having a message for this quarter, if we want to speak in financial terms. The cause and the people have to care enough, and when they do, corporations do respond, historically and typically, if they feel that it's to their benefit and they can sell more product or be more profitable and attract attention in a positive way, they will respond. If they don't think that the public cares, then they'll play golf, as was just mentioned by James, and do what they want.
Thank you.
I think just
Rene, I know Rene had some.
Just what Mark says, the one thing I want to say is this week, I live in these many private, spaces and places on the internet. And I've been actually having conversations with Facebook employees. And I'll also say that Facebook employees have gone out to voice what their concerns with Facebook. And so it is important to have people on the inside. So we need your young people to be inside some of these corporations. Even though corporations do bad things, we need people inside corporations who have ethics. So.
I know Rene wanted to say something, and then Tanya.
I saw Tanya, I think, wanted to say something before me, so I'll let Tanya go first, and then I'll go after. Yeah, sorry.
Hey, thanks, Rene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to jump in because I've been bringing this up on other panels that are related to industry and business. And, I've been grappling with this question because I work in marketing and advertising. 6 months ago, I came up with the question, can socialists work in advertising? And I think the answer is yes, right? It's just a question of understanding what is capitalism and inevitably its inherent mistakes and misjustices that come with it. And, you think about how capitalism was never really set up to work by those who created it. It's racism and inequality that it is not just a flaw in the system, it is the core of its design. So the proof that capitalism was never set up to work by those who created it is basically where you see the poorer fighting the poorer. And you see the rich feeding off of everyone. And only greed is winning. So is advertising and social media actually stewards of this inevitable fate? So it's really, I think where Noam Chomsky, he talks about socialism and what it was intended and what it actually became in the US because we were fighting the Russians at the time. And it's a misnomer as to what people think socialism actually is. I think the Scandinavians and some other countries understand what it is and they've been living it and they have marketing and they have advertising. And it's truly a situation where it is difficult to get people to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. And that's all I'll have to say about that.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I think, you know, again, like it's hilarious when it comes to this stuff. Like, number one, I think now when we're age of technology, I think sometimes people have to take a breath and also do your due diligence on when you're spending or what you're doing. Like, look into the company and look what they're supporting, and like look at those things. I think that, I mean, those are just, I think, some simple things you could do. So if you're seeing something that doesn't align with your values, then don't support that. Don't support that company. You know, also it goes to, and you can do that now with technology much easier than it was per se 20 to 30 years ago, when people are just looking at a commercial, or you're hearing what someone says, or someone endorses something, and you're like, oh, it's good. And that goes parallel to voting. Like, everybody's like, yeah, let's go vote. Let's go vote, 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 vote. Yeah, it's important to vote. But do you really know who you're voting for sometimes? I mean, I'm going to just keep it 100% with myself. Like, you know, I grew up as being taught to be a Democrat, right? So I would go in the booth sometimes and be like, yeah, I'm voting. Click, 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 all Democrat, okay? I could have voted for the DA that didn't give two shits about, part of my language, the person that was locking up all these people from systemic racism and all that stuff. I could have been part of that problem, you know? So I had to take my personal accountability, because I didn't read up and research that district attorney. I didn't read up about the council person in my, you know, is this council person going to really support what my values, or what I believe should be happening in my community, you know, and I think that's something that even as a whole in our country, like, I don't think in our educational system that we're really even understanding, taught how it's important how to vote. Not just now, like during your midterms, it's important how things run within Congress and Senate, like how those things, you know, attribute to what goes on. And so when we're saying vote, we have to also educate, like, look into these, you know, the people you're voting for, like, you know, read some of the stuff, or even go to a community board, like, so your district meetings, like where your community meetings, where these people do show up. Like, cause I started doing more and more of that, like in the last like few years, like 4 to 5 years, and you could actually talk to them, and you could get a vibe of like, okay, what they're saying, and like, do you feel it's authentic, or what do you align with that, you know? And another thing is, like, when you're looking at some of these businesses, like, for example, corporation, yeah, look what they're supporting. Like, we have a corporation that's in our have right now that's called prison. Like, people can buy stocks in some private prisons and make money off of it, you know? So if you're gonna have privatization of jails, of course, if people wanna make money, what do you have to have in it? People to be inside of these cells. So, you know, we have to look at, okay, how do you stop that? Like, and how do you stop these things? Because these are machines that are being run, not just jails, but just these big corporations that you have to take the time. Like, you know, I think to add what James is saying and other people, you have to keep checking it. Like, you have to keep saying it, or it goes, oh, well, whatever. Like, I'll give just a quick example. I could probably say that every person in here has done it at one point in their life. When you signed up for an app, or you signed up for something and it says, read through this contract of what you're signing up for, and you click, I accept it. I'm sure at one point that most people have just clicked it and been like, I didn't read what this is about, and just because I want to get on the app, or I want to get into like whatever they're allowed, you know, whatever thing you're getting into. And I think that's some of the stuff as us individually have to do a little more due diligence, like taking that second to kind of understand what you're supporting, or, you know, what you're putting into, because it obviously when it is corporations, it is about profit. It's about money, or these businesses wouldn't exist if they're not making money. So that's just some few thoughts to sink in with.
James.
Every week, keep doing it, Shira. I appreciate this.
Yeah, and someone had to respond. Well, you wanted to respond to Tanya, and then I know Clivia after that wanted to say something.
I got it. Well, we do it every week, though. I just want to acknowledge, Shira, that we've been doing this every week. It's awesome. Thank you. It's wonderful working with you. Both your parents are here, so I'm acknowledging.
Thanks for calling it out. Mark Lazar, yes, is my dad, and Carrie Charney is my mom.
Nice.
I've been thinking about this because I'm thinking about bringing my mom on for like I want to bring her into a whole thing about.
Yes.
about raising mixed kids. I have a whole concept around this. It's gonna be dope. Okay, first of all, to Tanya, thank you so much. You know, I think that you know, if media is paid, owned, and earned, you know, we got to make earned really earn, you know, and we can't just be giving away, you know, headlines because Nike decided to put an ad up, you know, that didn't even say the word black, right? We have to really put pressure on these brands and not give them you know, a front page because they did something human. And I think it's really important to recognize that, you know, yes, brands are part of culture, but you know, so many of us that buy the products that come from the communities that make these corporations what they are just not being heard both in the streets and even in the buildings. And so, so yeah, I hope we can disrupt the system with people like you inside. I used to own an agency, so I know your world really well. Yeah. And I think when you're at an agency, you get a front row seat at a brand's good and bad side. So I keep up the good work. And yeah, sure, this has been good. I'm so excited.
Yeah, just as we wrap things up, I want to do final thoughts from some people or questions. And before we go, we're going to have a beautiful closing ceremony. So stay tuned for that. So Clivia, do you wanted to say something?
Very short, answering Heidi's question. The South African Truth Commission, they had hearings not only for victims, but also for political parties, for businesses, for the legal institution. And I think it would be really good if, what I feel is that the truth needs to come up. It needs to be acknowledged. I'm from Germany, and we have brought so much pain and suffering and through the Nazi era, but we have also come to acknowledge and to repay reparations. So I think the truth is the first thing that needs to come up. It needs to be acknowledged, and it would be great if, however it would look like, but if there would be a commission where businesses have to be accountable, because I think this racial segregation has made them become very rich in not paying people equally, and I think it needs to be addressed. It needs to come to light. So that's what I would like to bring into that. I don't know how to structure this, but it's very important to not only focus on the victims of what happened, but also on all the institutions, the legal institution. Of course, the judges didn't appear before the South African Truth Commission. It's very shameful for my profession, but I think everybody needs to be accountable for whichever role they are in. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And Chifil said something really powerful. I'm trying to go to it. Our chat has been, you know, lots been going on in our chat. So thank you for everyone for contributing to that. Oh my God, seek to understand before seeking to be understood, which I think is something we can all take in our own way today, what that means to each of us, whether it be the past, this moment, or the future. So I do want to, if anyone has anything else to bring up, who joined us today, special guests or on the host committee, please let me know right now. This is an open forum for everyone. Feel free to chat or say something or take your audio, unmute yourself. And then, hello? Did someone want to say something?
I just want to say you've done a wonderful, wonderful work here. I'm so pleased, so thankful to hear every word that's been shared here and the incredible passion and devotion that's in this circle. And there's just no power in heaven and earth that's going to stop this from happening. It's what's been prophesied. And I shared those in some of those things in the chat, but I just want to say that much. Wow. Oh, you've got it.
Thank you, Chief Phil. And then I also know we wanted to start actually a book. If you're on our WhatsApp, we've been debating about doing a book club. And I don't know how everyone wants to decide on that or be part of it. We were going to have a little voting on in our live right now on Zoom. You can like a poll, so we could put it up, and if everyone wants to say what they would want to read. The WhatsApp also is, and I'll put it in the chat, it's a really super easy link. It's bit.ly, the bit.ly Other America WhatsApp. And so that's where we continue to have conversations, share resources, connect with one another in between these town halls. So I don't know, Sarah, if we can include the poll. And then I definitely want Chief Phil to send us off with a beautiful closing ceremony after that. What? Oh,
Can you
Rene.
describe the books? Can you describe the books? I have no idea what they are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could go through them. I didn't have that on the ready, so that actually would probably be good. Where's the poll? I didn't even get it. I might have to continue doing it in the chat.
Yeah, let's continue doing the chat.
Yeah, because I should have, like, this was, yeah, and I acknowledge was last minute in terms of me adding this part. So I would understand that a lot of you don't know these books. I've heard about some, like, most of these. Some of them were actually recommended by people in the WhatsApp. So I personally didn't know, but I wanted to include them as possibilities. So we'll include that in the chat. I think probably would be best, unless some of you know what they are and you could click them, and it'll give us a sense of where things are leaning, but we will definitely make more of a decision on the WhatsApp group. So that's the answer to that. But Chief Phil, if you want to also, and like, yeah, once again, if you know these books, if you want to look them up while we give you a bit of time while we do this closing ceremony, or you could once again look them up and then take a screenshot and then let us know in the WhatsApp what you think. That might be the best. Yes.
Can I say one more thing before we go into closing? Is that
totally? Yeah, Rene.
All right,
yes.
cool.
Last words right now.
Yeah, I'll just say thank everyone who's here. Like, your energy, just this conversation is great. And I just want to add to something that Chief Phil said before about healing, you know, with even Mother Earth. And obviously we are on this Mother Earth and we're part of it. So that's, you know, we all have to acknowledge that ourselves, we all have healing to do. And we all have the healing to do ourselves, and taking the time to do that, whether it's individually, as a group, and things of that nature. So that's important. And racism is, and these, you know, climate, all these injustices, these are kind of like, if you want to say mental health or health issues that need to be resolved, because to hate somebody and to want to kill people or take people away and put people in some ways, like, you really deep down have something deep rooted to feel like there's something you're not feeling great within yourself to feel that way, because we've all been, you know, as human beings born in the place of love. That's what it is. So if you know, if we've had all this, there's some type of fear, there's some type of emotion that are deep rooted that like need to get uprooted from, you know, ourselves, you know, that's been passed down through ancestries or whatever that is. And I think that's the place we're in right now, you know, so that's, you know, we need to do that. So that's all I want to say, and thank everybody for this conversation. I really appreciate everybody here.
Thank you so much. So Chief Phil, and we'll do that. Yeah, everyone's messaging me with the books. We'll do the books. Look at that, screenshot it, go in the WhatsApp. Let us know what you think. We want to hear from you. This is a consistent exchange and conversation. So thank you for your patience, everyone, as we continue this process.
Well, we've come now to this time of going forward. And I just want to share this, that comes from a new, we're releasing this, coming up in a new book, Prophecies, Dynamic Change, New Global Civilization. And I just want to share these thoughts. Though the spiritual path that the Creator has traced for us at many times seems lost in the ominous shadows that are now enveloping and stricken humanity, the eternal light that is continually shining upon us is such brightness that no earthly darkness can ever eclipse its splendor. Though we are small in numbers and limited as yet in our experiences, powers, and resources, the divine force which energizes our vision and unprecedented concerted action is limitless in its range, incalculable in its potency. And this is the one we're facing. Without question, the enemies, whom every acceleration, the progress of our unified work will rise up, are fierce, numerous, and relating. Yet if we persevere, invisible spiritual hosts will, as promised, rush forth to our aid. As prophesied, will enable us to vanquish any hopes of our destruction and will annihilate the forces of disunity, but in a prayerful way. Oh, Tunkasha Wakantaka, Creator of the universe, most beloved one, all-powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one. We especially ask tonight and this morning, wherever we are in Mother Earth, that we might pause and respect and honor this seventh generation that's arising everywhere all at once upon this Mother Earth and rising up with such brilliance and beauty and power and strength and kindness and compassion and insight. You might empower us all to respect this rising generations, also the great leadership that is destined to be from womankind, the feminine dimensions of who we are as human beings. We call upon that, the four directions, Father Sky, Mother Earth, and however human beings choose to pray or to communicate, whether it's however that is, we just honor that. We just ask that that be directed towards understanding the realization of the prior unity and oneness of our human family, and that we may truly have unity in diversity with honor and respect for uniqueness of every human being. Because we know if we went to every granary in the world, if we went to every beach, no piece of sand or no piece of grain would be the same. Let us honor that. Let us honor the cultures of Mother Earth, the languages of Mother Earth, and especially the grandmothers of Mother Earth. Hauli michante washtelo, shuk mano hemeado, chinupasapa hemeado, hauli michante washte. Aho. Yelama
Oh.
You gotta come back. Chief, you can't leave us, bro. Please.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Let's get down on this. Woo!
Put the plan together. Let's put the.
You got it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And usually what happens is me and James just hang out while everyone leaves. If anyone wants to talk or connect, we just hang out. But I want to thank again our special guest, Chief Phil Lane Jr. I want to thank Chelsea Miller, Jamie Margolin, and of course, Rene, John, Sandy, and Hip Hop Loves Foundation. Again, check that out. We're going to actually send, again, the email I keep reminding you of all these links and a recap, and also a link to this on demand too. So in case you missed anything, and you can always, once again, get in touch with us. We're super easy to find. And on the WhatsApp group, it's an amazing group that we can continue this conversation. People are constantly sharing questions and resources. So I really encourage you all to go there. And to find your own inner peace, Peace Inside Live also is the platform that hosts this Zoom Live. And it's something that I created with my friend Jordana, where we offer Zoom sessions around mindfulness, meditation, movement, and they're donation-based. We make it accessible to all. So I encourage you to check out one of our classes, to drop in and do the inner work for yourself, because we all need some of that right now. We really need some self-care, some self-love to work through this and to do the work we're meant to do on this planet.